Thanks for tuning in to Murder News, your true crime news source for missing persons, breaking cases, survivor stories, and cold cases, plus recommendations for the newest TV shows and podcasts. It's the month of May, and if you have found yourself in a midsummer festival, surrounded by flowers, rolling hills, baby goats, and wait, what's this? Is this a cult? Now your friends have all gone missing, and your philandering boyfriend is being burned in a bear suit. But no need to worry, you are the May Queen, and you are amongst true crime friends. I'm Aurora.
And I'm Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends to join the commune at patreon.com/murdernews. This is the Week in True Crime.
We do want to issue a disclaimer that while our name is Murder News, we often focus on missing persons, survival stories, and sexual assault, giving preference to cases affecting BIPOC and LGBTQIA communities, and some that may not be getting enough attention by mainstream media. Our intent is to bring attention to these cases and make sure these stories are told from the perspective of the victim or survivor. We do our best to report accurate information about these cases, but because they are still breaking, it can be hard to find reliable information. We love hearing your feedback, so just send us a message if the information we have researched is inaccurate or out of date, if you just think we got it wrong, or if you want us to help share you or your loved one's story. Our email is always open at murdernews@gmail.com.
On April 29th, authorities were called for a wellness check at a home in Casita Park in Crestone, Colorado. Inside, the remains of 45-year-old Amy Carlson were found. Amy was the head of a fringe spiritual group called Love Has Won. In other words, she was a cult leader. The group worshipped Amy, calling her mom or mother god. They believe she is the creator of all things, reincarnated over 500 times in a 19 billion-year quest to save humanity. A man named Jason Castillo served as Father God, but his presence wasn't as constant as Carlson's. There are a few who have held the position of Father God over the years. Followers of the cult were encouraged to move to their co-living space in Colorado, from which they would shoot daily live stream videos that appeared on YouTube as well as the group's Facebook page. The beliefs of Love Has Won are all over the place, combining New Age stuff with QAnon conspiracy theories. They believe in lizard people and a 1% cabal that controls the world. They subscribe to hollow earth theories and seem to have collected stories from different religions to cobble together their own. But what keeps the group together and its followers faithful is a pattern of abuse. Folks who live in the shared living space are only permitted to sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, and their food intake is severely restricted. Amy Carlson was often drunk and high and screaming obscenities and insults at the slightest inconvenience. Nonetheless, the folks at Love Has Won believe that Amy will lead 144,000 chosen ones in a great ascension. Understandably, many were concerned about the risk of a mass suicide taking place if Amy, who had been unwell for some time, were to pass away. But no one expected the events that actually transpired following Carlson's death. Authorities say the remains discovered were partially mummified, and it's very likely that Amy died weeks or even a month before she was found. Though daily live streams continued on, speaking of the group's mother god as though she was just in the next room. Amy Carlson's remains had been placed in a sleeping bag, decorated with Christmas lights, and set up in something of a shrine at the group's Colorado headquarters. Amy's eyes had been removed, and glitter makeup surrounded where her eyes had once been. Carlson's exact cause and manner of death are still uncertain, but it's likely she died from natural causes. On top of a high volume of alcohol and drugs, Amy also consumed a number of pseudoscientific treatments and supplements, including colloidal silver, which had given her skin an irreversible bluish tint. Following the discovery of their leader's remains, a number of members of Love Has Won were arrested, including Jason Castillo, known as Father God, as well as Ryan Kramer, John Robertson, Obdulia Franco Gonzalez, Sarah Rudolph, Christopher Royer, and Karen Raymond. Those arrested are being held on bond in separate cells. They face a slew of charges, including abuse of a corpse, child abuse, and false imprisonment. So far, Love Has Won seems to live on. Though their website and Facebook pages have been disabled, members still post daily videos online. Time will tell if the death of their leader and subsequent arrests will cause the cult to fizzle out. If you're as fascinated by cults as we are, you'll definitely want to check out today's episode of our podcast, Murder, Murder News, the Listen Edition. We'll be taking a closer look at the history of Love Has Won, a breakdown of their beliefs, and how Amy Carlson went from McDonald's manager to cult leader. My sources today include Vice, Grunge, and Guru Mag, and you'll find those links in the details below, as well as some resources to help if you or someone you know is involved with Love Has Won.
Natalia Smut was a 24-year-old drag performer and rapper from San Jose, California. And wow, was she an amazing performer. She was known for her signature sparkly smut choker and her colorful hair. She would often perform around San Jose at drag brunches, fundraisers for the Black trans femme community, and basically just dance her ass off at events around the area. She'd also been performing at events over Zoom during the pandemic. We spoke with Natalia's sister, Vanessa Singh, about her sister's life.
And one story that will always pop into my head about my sister is my mom's wedding. So during my mom's wedding, since she was always a performer from day one, she actually got up and sang "I'm a Genie in the Bottle" in front of everyone and had the moves and knew the whole dance and everything. So, like I said, my sister was always a performer.
Her sister, Vanessa Singh, said she commanded a stage, all eyes and attention drawn to her like a magnet. She says Natalia was a natural-born performer, earning a living as a dancer and drag queen.
She performed a lot in San Jose and San Francisco. Her idea would be San Francisco would be the best place that she would love to perform. Her most iconic one, I would say, out of all the performances I watched would be, it's hard. She did one of her last ones to Rihanna in San Francisco. So I think that one will always stick with me as well.
At 2:30 a.m. on April 23rd, Natalia's boyfriend, 22-year-old Elijah Cruz, called 911 saying he had stabbed her and needed help. When police arrived at Natalia's apartment at Hillview Court Apartments in Milpitas, they discovered Natalia, who had her throat cut and was badly injured. She died in the hospital shortly after. A motive for the senseless murder has not yet been released, but police are treating her murder as domestic violence. Elijah was arrested at the scene and has been charged with murder. He was arraigned on Tuesday, but he's not yet entered a plea. Natalia is at least the 17th trans person to be murdered in the U.S. this year, and unfortunately, 2021 is on the path to being one of the deadliest years for the trans community. This isn't something we can ignore, and when I think of true crime community, I think of all the activism and just giving a shit about what happens to people. So really take some time and think about what you can do to have a better understanding and to help support the trans community. There are so many easy ways to support them by following them on social media, showing them love, and listening to their stories. One really great thing you can do is to donate to Natalia's GoFundMe, which is linked down below. My sources for today were KPIX5, Advocate, San Jose Inside, and Mercury News. We are so excited to have Amara here from this week's favorite podcast, Black Girl Gone. Amara tells the story of missing and murdered Black women and women of color in America. Amara, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. I'm so excited to have you here. It's so exciting to meet you. I love your show so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things I really love about your show is that you have a focus on missing person cases. And it's kind of one of my favorite genres in true crime because I feel like there's this hope that maybe we could find the person and maybe they're out there and they're okay and our community could help find them. So I think that's really cool that you do that on your show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. When I first, started the podcast, I was actually going to focus exclusively on missing person cases. And as I started researching, I came across so many other cases and I was like, I don't want to just confine myself to only being able to talk about missing person cases. So, I also want to include, unsolved murders and, even some murders that have been solved, but are just not, well known and maybe can present, a cautionary tale to someone else, or, there may be an organization behind them that, I want to help, bring to the light and things like that. So, ultimately I made the decision to include these other crimes as well.
I love that. And I think that's great. And I think it's like a very much needed niche. And so what inspired you to start your podcast?
So I, like many people who start true crime podcasts, was a true crime fan, or still am a true crime fan. And so like my husband always calls it murder porn, from South Park. He's like, you always watch murder porn. And like, I literally, like, it's literally all that I watch. Like, I won't watch like, a Netflix, special about something, or, every now and then I might need something lighthearted. But for the most part, like, I'm just intrigued by true crime, and I always have been. And so, I started diving into the world of podcasts and listening to podcasts. But I live in Philadelphia, and, there's crimes happening to Black women. And I'm just like, in my mind, even locally, I was like, wow, I wish that there was like some more attention to be brought to these cases. And I know that, and especially popular podcasts, like they're inundated with suggestions, and they're trying to cover, so many cases, and they get so much information, but there seems to be such a lack of focus on cases involving Black women. And, not that podcasts don't cover them at all, because there are podcasts that have covered cases of missing Black women and murdered Black women. But I wanted my podcast to just focus on those cases and bring awareness to those cases.
I think that's fantastic and absolutely so needed. Because you're right, it's like, even if other podcasters are covering women of color and Black women specifically from time to time, it's really just not enough. And I also feel like since the dawn of true crime history, there's been so many people willing to tell stories about white women who are thin, who have blonde hair and whatever. So like, let's get some more diversity. I love it.
Exactly. And that's how I felt. And it's once I started to create the podcast and actually started researching these cases, I started to realize how much of a disparity exists in even the coverage, the way the police handle these cases. Some cases I'm struggling to find even kind of the basic information about this case. And it's like, wow, like I wonder, and not that we hear about every single case of a missing white woman. It's not, because there's missing people all the time. But there's certain cases where you're like, I wonder why this didn't get the attention that maybe this other case did. And, it's not as, it's not as popular, or sometimes the circumstances of these women's lives cause people to not care. Sometimes they're not the picture perfect victim. Sometimes they, there are a lot of times they're single moms, they're, they live in, rough areas. And so people kind of just like throw them away. And it's like, oh, well, this is what happens to, these people in these neighborhoods. And I wanted people to understand that that's not the case, that these are real women. They have families that love them, that they care about them, and where they're from, or even if they, were living high-risk lifestyles, that doesn't lessen their lives and, and doesn't make what happened to them any less, terrible. So.
Absolutely. And so how long have you had an interest in true crime? What got you started in the first case? Like, was it watching true crime TV as a kid? Is it because you live in Philadelphia? What's your origin?
It really was like, so I was thinking back the other day about how, like, honestly, when I was like a young kid, like, unsolved mysteries and those kinds of stories, they actually scared me. Like, I didn't like those, they would scare me. And then all of a sudden I started watching, like, I think I really started with like Dateline. Like, Dateline was like my first kind of like, true crime news show that I watched. And I really got heavy into it in college, actually. Like, I would watch it from time to time. But in college, I just got really into it. I saw an episode of Dateline, and it just like, from then on out, I was just like all in on Dateline. And then I moved on to like Forensic Files, and I was like all in on Forensic Files. And back then, like, before it was, I think it's HLN now, it was like Court TV or something like that. And so they put all those shows on there. So I would watch all of that. And, and then from there, it just, into true crime documentaries, and then, eventually podcasts. And so, it's been a while. Like, when I met my husband, he was like, so this is what you like to, like, 'cause he's like a goofy, he likes South Park and Family Guy, like those, like he would, like, all of his TV consumption is animated. So for him, he's just like, it's so dark. Why do you want to watch it? And I'm like, it's fascinating, like what, human beings will do to other human beings, especially over the things that they'll do it over. Like sometimes, usually it's something so petty and it's, money and these insignificant things. And so, I find it fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because my husband and I have very different interests too. And amongst his interests is definitely not true crime.
Yeah, I think a lot of us wives, that like true crime are like alone in our, love of true crime, and it probably scares our husbands. Like, why does she watch this so much?
Absolutely. Keep your eyes open.
I don't play because I watch true crime a lot.
Right. Well, I'm so interested in the cases that you've covered so far, and I really especially loved your episode on Kiera Coles. Are there cases that you've already covered or are planning on covering coming up that have really stayed with you?
Definitely the Kiera Coles case stuck out to me because I remember when I first heard about Kiera Coles going missing, and this is obviously way before I started the podcast. And, the circumstances of, her going missing were just so mysterious. And, once I started researching the case, there was the video of Kiera that for so long had been out there in the media that people thought was Kiera, only to find out just recently that it wasn't even Kiera. And so that has just kind of like stuck with me because I feel like we spent so much time thinking, this is Kiera, and I can't figure out why the cops didn't want her family to say anything. It was just, it was a hard case. And then of course, her being pregnant, and, all the, signs were pointing that she was excited about this pregnancy and she had no reason to leave on her own. And so that was a tough one. I think also the, it's like all of them really are, hold a special place in my heart. I think the other case that was really tough and really hit home for me was the story of Asia Adams, because she was a young Black woman from Philadelphia, and I actually lived at the time of this murder not too far from where the murder happened. So I lived in that same area. I know that street. I know that community. I've driven past, down that street. She went to a state college that I went to. Not that I went to a state college as well, like her, and just our, I was raised by a single mother. I was the only child. There were so many parts of our lives that I feel like intersected. I could have, seen her somewhere. We could have been in the same places, especially during that time in our lives. So that one stuck with me a lot as well. Those ones, but all of them. The Nikki McCowan case, being missing 20 years now. Just the recent one I just dropped today, the episode 10, the Akia Eggleston case. She was 8 months pregnant. So, all of these cases are, important to me for different reasons, and I feel connected to them for different reasons. It's always funny. I'm doing the stories and I'm finding parallels in my life, and I'm like, wow, it could have been me in so many of these cases. So
right, absolutely, those overlaps in cases really get me too. Like it's like, what if that could have been me? Like, what if I would have met this person? It really, it's eerie, and it makes you really want to help.
Yeah, it's just like one wrong decision, like it's like, especially in the Asia Adams case, because she was, it was a boyfriend that she was dating. I'm like, how many times have I had a boy that I met and didn't really know that well, thought he was, maybe only knew him for 4 or 5 months because I'm young and we're having fun, and I have him in my house and we're alone, and it's just like, that one, that was a really tough one to cover. So, yeah.
Right. Well, Amara, it has been such a pleasure having you. Can you let our viewers know where they can find you on social media?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram at Black Girl Gone Podcast. I'm also on Facebook at Black Girl Gone Podcast. And we're also on Twitter at Black Girl Gone P1 on Twitter. So follow us on all of our socials, and keep you updated about upcoming episodes and give you some previews of our shows.
Fantastic. And be sure to subscribe to Black Girl Gone wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode.
This week, we're watching Things Heard and Seen on Netflix. We thought we would mix it up a little bit with a horror starring Amanda Seyfried and a whole lot of It's Always the Husband. The movie is based on the book All Things Cease to Appear by Elizabeth Brundage and features ghosts, seances, and toxic masculinity. It's a super interesting thriller, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on the movie in the comments below.
We want to invite you to join us for the ultimate virtual true crime drag brunch. We're hosting a drag show with Murders of Drag, Beyond the Rainbow, John Bonet Superstar, featuring Noodles, London Bradshaw, and Wilma Fingerdew. Bring those mimosas, Bloody Marys, lattes, and pancakes. All proceeds benefit the Trans Defense Fund LA, which is a mutual aid group created in response to the disproportionate violence trans women face. The Trans Defense Fund LA provides trans individuals with safety kits and self-defense classes. Check out the link below to get your tickets for the show.
Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
Help support Murder News by signing up for our commune at murdermurder.news, and your $5 a month sponsorship helps us keep the true crime lights on. It helps us produce our weekly show and helps support our amazing writers that keep you up to date with the latest breaking news every day on murdermurder.news. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you next week.